The rain pounded against the stained glass windows of Stirling Manor, but the storm inside was far more violent. Isabel stood alone in the centre of the grand hall, her clothes soaked, her head bowed as the people she called family laughed in her face. Beatrice Stirling, the woman she had called mother for 20 years, pointed a manicured finger at the door. "Get out, you leech! You are nothing to this family now that Richard is dead." "Nothing," the guests whispered. The humiliation was absolute. But as Isabel turned to leave, the heavy oak doors slammed open. A man in a charcoal suit stepped forward, holding a single red file. "I wouldn't be so hasty, Mrs. Stirling," the lawyer's voice cut through the room like a blade. "Because according to this, you are the one trespassing in Isabel's house." The silence in the library of the Stirling estate was heavy, suffocating, and smelled faintly of old leather and expensive lilies. Richard Stirling, the titan of the shipping industry in Boston, had been buried only 3 hours ago. The dirt was fresh on his grave, yet the vultures were already circling. Isabel Thorne sat in the corner, a ghost in her own home. She wore a simple black dress, one she had bought herself because her stepmother, Beatrice, had forgotten to order her mourning attire. Isabel's hands were folded in her lap, her knuckles white. She wasn't crying. She had cried enough by Richard's bedside during those agonizing final months, while Beatrice and her biological children, Julian and Camilla, were vacationing in the French Riviera. "Can we get on with this?" Julian sighed, checking his platinum Rolex. He was 25, handsome in a superficial way, but his eyes were empty. "I have a flight to Aspen tonight. I can't be stuck here listening to legal jargon all day." "Patience, darling," Beatrice cooed, patting his hand. She sat at the head of the mahogany table as if it were a throne. She looked impeccable, not a hair out of place, her dry eyes hidden behind designer sunglasses, even though they were indoors. "Mr. Blackwood is just organizing his papers. We'll have you on that jet soon enough." Camilla, the youngest at 22, was scrolling through her phone, her heels clicking rhythmically against the table leg. She didn't even look up. "Mum, make sure you get the summer house in the Hamptons finalized first. I promised the girls a weekend trip next month." Isabel felt a lump form in her throat. "He hasn't even been gone a day," she thought, "and you're already carving him up." Mr. Arthur Blackwood, Richard's personal attorney for over 30 years, sat at the opposite end of the table. He was an older man with silver hair and eyes that had seen too much of the Stirling family's greed. He shuffled his papers slowly, his gaze lingering on Isabel in the corner. "Isabel," Mr. Blackwood said softly, "please, join us at the table." Beatrice scoffed, a sharp, ugly sound. "Oh, Arthur, don't bother. She's fine over there. This concerns the family, the real family. Isabel was just Richard's charity case. Now that he's gone, there's really no need for her to be involved in the financial discussions." "On the contrary, Mrs. Stirling," Blackwood said, his voice firm, "the reading of the last will and testament requires all beneficiaries to be present." "Beneficiaries?" Julian laughed, a cruel bark of a sound. "You think Dad left her something? Maybe his old book collection? Or the gardening tools?" "Julian, be nice," Camilla giggled, finally looking up. Maybe he left her enough for a bus ticket back to wherever she came from. Isabel stood up. Her legs felt weak, but she walked to the table and took the empty seat next to the lawyer. She could feel the heat of their glares burning into her skin. She had lived in this house since she was 7 years old, ever since Richard married Beatrice. She had been the one who made Richard his tea, the one who read to him when his eyesight failed, the one who held his hand when he took his last breath. But to Beatrice, Julian, and Camilla, She had always been the help that wouldn't leave. "Let us begin," Blackwood said, opening the leather-bound folder. "I, Richard James Sterling, being of sound mind." The standard legalities washed over the room. Small bequests were made to the staff, generous amounts that made the maid Maria weep softly in the hallway. Then came the assets. "To my wife, Beatrice." Blackwood paused. Beatrice leaned forward, her greed practically vibrating off her. "I leave the liquid cash accounts totaling $4 million and the Mercedes collection." Beatrice's smile faltered. $4 million? That's it? Richard was worth hundreds of millions. Where is the rest? "To my son, Julian, and my daughter, Camilla," Blackwood continued, ignoring her outburst. "I leave the trust funds established in their names, granting a monthly stipend of $5,000, contingent on gainful employment." "5,000? Julian stood up, slamming his hand on the table. "That won't even cover my car insurance. What is this joke?" "Sit down, Julian," Blackwood said, his eyes hard. "Where is the company?" Beatrice hissed, removing her sunglasses to reveal eyes cold as ice. "Where is Sterling Shipping? Where is the real estate portfolio, the Manhattan penthouse, this manor?" Blackwood closed the folder. He took a deep breath. "The remainder of the estate, including the controlling shares of Sterling Shipping, the global real estate holdings, and the ownership of Sterling Manor, is complicated." "Complicated?" Beatrice shrieked. "I am his wife. It goes to me." "Actually," Blackwood said, looking directly at Isabel, "it doesn't." Beatrice stood up slowly, her face turning a dangerous shade of crimson. "If you are about to say what I think you are about to say, if you suggest for 1 second that he left anything substantial to this orphan," she pointed a trembling finger at Isabel. Isabel shrank back. She hadn't expected anything. She didn't want their money. She just wanted to stay in the only home she remembered. "Richard left specific instructions," Blackwood said calmly. "However, there is a clause, a condition regarding the deed to the house." "I don't care about clauses," Beatrice screamed. She turned to Isabel. "You did this. You poisoned him against us in those last few months, didn't you? Whispering in his ear while he was doped up on morphine." "I didn't." Isabel's voice shook. "I never asked for anything." "Liar," Camilla spat. "You've been plotting this, trying to steal our birthright." Beatrice took a deep breath, composing herself. A sinister calm washed over her. "Well, it doesn't matter what the paper says, Arthur, because a will can be contested, and I will tie this up in court for decades until there is nothing left but ash. But right now, I want her out." "Mrs. Sterling, you cannot evict a resident without—" "I want her out!" Beatrice roared. She grabbed Isabel's arm, her nails digging into the soft flesh. "You have 10 minutes to pack your trash and leave my house. If you are still here in 11 minutes, I'm calling security to throw you out, physically." "Please," Isabel pleaded, tears finally spilling over. "Please, Beatrice, it's pouring rain. I have nowhere to go. Just let me stay the night. We can talk about this tomorrow." "You aren't family," Julian sneered, walking over to loom over her. "You never were. Dad just felt sorry for you. Now that he's dead, the charity ride is over." "Grab her bag," Beatrice commanded Camilla. Camilla ran out of the room and returned moments later with a large duffel bag, Isabel's bag, which had been packed and waiting by the door. They had planned this. They had planned to kick her out before the will was even read. "Here." Camilla threw the bag at Isabel. It hit her in the chest, heavy and hard. "We packed for you. All your rags are in there. Get out." Beatrice pointed to the grand double doors of the library that led to the main hall. Isabel looked at Mr. Blackwood. The lawyer looked furious, his hand hovering over his phone, but he gave her a small, imperceptible nod. "Wait," his eyes seemed to say. "Just wait." Isabel gripped the handle of her bag. She didn't say a word. She turned and walked out of the library, down the long corridor, lined with portraits of sterling ancestors who looked down on her with disapproval. She reached the massive front door. She could hear the footsteps of the family following her, eager to watch her leave, eager to lock the door behind her. She opened the door. The wind howled, blowing rain into the foyer. It was a storm of biblical proportions. "And don't come back begging," Beatrice yelled over the sound of the thunder. "If I see you on this property again, I'll have you arrested for trespassing." Isabel stepped out onto the wet stone steps. The rain soaked her instantly, plastering her hair to her face. She shivered violently. She took one step down, then another. The heavy door slammed shut behind her. The sound echoed like a gunshot. She heard the lock click. She was alone, disowned, homeless. She walked down the long driveway, the gravel crunching under her wet shoes. She made it to the iron gates, intending to walk to the bus station 3 miles away. But as she reached the gate, a black limousine pulled up, blocking her path. It wasn't a family car. It had diplomatic flags on the fenders and tinted windows. The rear window rolled down. "Get in, Isabel," a voice said. It wasn't Mr. Blackwood. It was a voice she hadn't heard in years. Isabel hesitated, the rain blinding her. "Who is that?" The door opened. A man stepped out with a large umbrella, shielding her instantly. It was Mr. Blackwood, but he wasn't alone. Inside the car sat a woman in her 60s, elegant, with steel grey hair and eyes that matched Isabel's perfectly. "Get in, child, before you catch pneumonia," the woman said. Her accent was European, refined and commanding. Isabel slid into the warm leather interior. She was shivering uncontrollably. Mr. Blackwood got in the front seat. "Who are you?" Isabel asked, her teeth chattering. "My name is Elena Vane," the woman said, handing Isabel a thick cashmere blanket. "And I am the reason Beatrice Sterling is about to lose everything." "I don't understand," Isabel stammered. "Beatrice just kicked me out. She said I get nothing." "Beatrice is a fool," Elena said sharply. "She thinks Richard owned Sterling Manor. She thinks Richard owned the shipping company. Richard was a good manager, a brilliant CEO, but he was an employee, Isabel. A very high-ranking one, but an employee nonetheless." Isabel blinked, wiping water from her eyes. "What?" "But it's called Sterling Shipping. It was rebranded," Elena explained, 30 years ago. But the controlling interest, the land the manor sits on, it was never Richard's to give away." Mr. Blackwood turned around from the front seat. "Isabel, do you remember Richard telling you about his first wife? The one who died before he met Beatrice?" "Catherine," Isabel nodded. "He said she died in childbirth." "She did," Elena said, her voice softening. "Catherine was my sister. And the fortune, the Vane fortune, belonged to her. When she died, everything was placed in a trust that Richard managed but did not own." "And the beneficiary of that trust?" Isabel asked, her heart pounding against her ribs. Elena smiled, a sad, sweet smile. The beneficiary was Catherine's child, the child Richard raised as his own, even though he knew he wasn't the biological father. The child he protected from the truth until she was old enough to understand. Isabel stopped breathing. "Me? But Beatrice always said I was adopted, that I was a charity case Richard picked up." "A lie," Mr. Blackwood said. "Richard married Beatrice for appearances. He needed a mother figure for you, but Beatrice turned out to be, well, you know. He couldn't divorce her, because she threatened to expose secrets that would hurt the company stock. So he waited. He waited for you to turn 21. "Today is my birthday," Isabel whispered. "Exactly," Elena said. "The trust unlocks today. The manor, the company, the accounts, they don't belong to Richard's estate. They belong to the Vane Trust. And you, Isabel Vane, are the sole heir." Isabel looked back at the house. Through the rain, she could see the lights of the library. She could imagine Beatrice, Julian, and Camilla celebrating, drinking Richard's expensive scotch, thinking they had won. "So," Elena said, her eyes hardening, "Mr. Blackwood has the eviction notices prepared. The police are already on their way to escort the trespassers off the premises. Are you ready to go back home?" Isabel thought of the years of abuse, the way Beatrice made her eat in the kitchen while they ate in the dining room, the way Julian mocked her clothes, the way Camilla stole her jewelry. She thought of Richard, who had loved her silently, protecting her inheritance the only way he knew how. Isabel tightened the blanket around her shoulders. She looked at Elena, then at Mr. Blackwood. "Turn the car around," Isabel said. The black limousine idled at the front steps, the engine a low, predatory purr beneath the roaring thunder. Behind it, 2 police cruisers pulled up, their blue and red lights flashing against the whetstone facade of Stirling Manor. Inside the library, the mood had shifted from solemn to celebratory with shocking speed. Beatrice had already opened a bottle of Richard's vintage Dom Perignon, the cork popping like a gunshot in the quiet house. "To fresh starts," Beatrice toasted, clinking her glass against Julian's, "and to getting rid of dead weight." "I still can't believe she didn't fight back," Camilla laughed, sipping her champagne while lounging in Richard's favorite leather chair. "She just walked out like a dog with its tail between its legs. Do you think she'll sleep under a bridge tonight?" "Who cares?" Julian scoffed, loosening his tie. "As long as she's not here, I'm going to turn her room into a gym, or maybe a walk-in humidor." Beatrice walked over to the window, swirling her drink. "It's done. The house is ours. The money is ours. Finally, I can redecorate. Richard's taste was so drab." She peered out into the darkness, her brow furrowed. "Julian, why are there lights in the driveway?" "Probably the catering van for the wake tomorrow," Julian muttered, checking his phone. "No." Beatrice stepped back, the glass trembling in her hand. "Those are police lights." Before Julian could stand up, the front doors of the manor, which Beatrice had so satisfyingly locked only 20 minutes ago, burst open. The sound echoed through the cavernous hall. "What is the meaning of this?" Beatrice shrieked, marching into the foyer. "I didn't call the police. If that girl came back to beg, arrest her." She stopped dead in her tracks. Isabel stood in the center of the foyer. She was no longer the shivering, soaked girl who had left. She was flanked by Mr. Blackwood on her right, and a stern, regal woman Beatrice didn't recognize on her left. Behind them stood 4 police officers, water dripping from their rain slickers onto the marble floor. "You!" Beatrice hissed, her eyes narrowing. "I told you to leave. Officers, arrest this girl for trespassing. She has been disowned." "Actually," the lead officer, a tall sergeant named Miller, stepped forward. "We're here to escort you off the premises, Mrs. Stirling." Beatrice laughed, a high-pitched, nervous sound. "Excuse me? This is my house. My husband just died." "Correction." Mr. Blackwood stepped forward, his voice projecting clearly through the hall. "Your husband resided here, but the house is owned by the Vane Trust, and as of 5:00 p.m. today, the sole beneficiary of that trust has exercised her right to evict unauthorized occupants." "What trust? What are you talking about?" Julian ran into the hall, Camilla trailing behind him. "Mum, what's going on?" "Show her, Arthur," Isabel said. Her voice was quiet, but it didn't shake. Mr. Blackwood produced a document, stamped with the official seal of the state court. He held it up. An emergency eviction order, signed by Judge Hamilton 10 minutes ago. You have been served, Beatrice. This is a mistake. Beatrice lunged for the paper, but Officer Miller blocked her path. Judge Hamilton is a friend of ours. We played golf last week. Judge Hamilton was a friend of Richard's, Elena Vane spoke up, stepping into the light, and he was quite displeased to hear that you threw his best friend's daughter out into a storm on the day of her father's funeral. Beatrice looked at Elena, and for the first time, genuine fear flickered in her eyes. Who are you? I am the executor of the Vane estate, Elena said coldly, and you are standing on my niece's property. Niece? Camilla gasped. Isabel doesn't have family. She does now, Isabel said, stepping closer. She looked at Beatrice, really looked at her, and realized how small the woman seemed without her cruelty to prop her up. You gave me 10 minutes to pack, Beatrice. Do you remember? Beatrice's mouth opened and closed like a fish. I'm feeling generous, Isabel continued, her expression hardening. I'll give you 5. You can't do this, Julian shouted, advancing on Isabel. I live here. My trust fund is frozen, Mr. Blackwood interrupted. Pending an audit of the company accounts. We have reason to believe you've been using company cards for personal expenses. That's embezzlement, Julian. I'd save your breath for your defense attorney. Julian went pale. He backed away, hitting the wall. 5 minutes, Officer Miller barked. Grab your essentials. Anything you can't carry, you leave behind. If you resist, you will be handcuffed. The scene that followed was chaotic and pathetic. Beatrice screamed threats, vowing to sue everyone in the room. Camilla cried hysterically, trying to stuff 5 pairs of designer boots into a tote bag. Julian stood in the corner, frantically deleting emails from his phone until an officer confiscated it as evidence. Isabel watched it all from the bottom of the stairs. She didn't help them. She didn't mock them. She just watched. When the 5 minutes were up, the officers escorted them out. Beatrice, still clutching her champagne glass, was guided firmly by the elbow. This isn't over, Beatrice screamed over her shoulder as she was shoved out into the rain. I made this family. I am a Sterling. You are nobody, Isabel. Nobody. The heavy oak door slammed shut, cutting off her voice. Silence returned to the manor. The only sound was the ticking of the grandfather clock and the distant rumble of thunder. Isabel let out a breath she felt like she had been holding for 20 years. Her knees buckled, but Eleanor caught her. You did well, Eleanor whispered, holding her upright. The house is yours, Isabel. It's finally yours. Isabel looked around the grand foyer. It felt different now. The shadows didn't seem so menacing. The portraits on the wall didn't seem to be judging her anymore. They seemed to be waiting. Maria, Isabel called out softly. The maid, who had been hiding in the kitchen hallway, peeked out, her eyes red from crying. Yes, Miss Isabel, Maria sniffled. Lock the gate, Isabel said, and then please, make some tea. For all of us. The euphoria of the eviction didn't last long. Reality, cold and sharp, set in the next morning. Isabel woke up in the master suite. She had moved her things out of the cramped servants' quarters in the attic the night before. The bed was enormous, the sheets made of Egyptian cotton, but she had barely slept. Every creak of the old house sounded like Beatrice coming back. She went downstairs to the breakfast nook. Elena was already there, reading the Boston Globe with a grim expression. Mr. Blackwood was on his phone, pacing the patio, his voice raised in agitation. Good morning, Isabel said, pouring herself coffee. Her hand shook slightly. Don't look at the television, Elena warned, folding the newspaper. Why? Isabel grabbed the remote before Elena could stop her. She turned on the TV mounted in the corner. It was a local news channel. The headline banner read, "Heiress throws grieving widow to the streets." On the screen, Beatrice was standing outside a hotel downtown. She looked disheveled, calculatedly so. Her makeup was slightly smeared, her hair unkempt. She was dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief while reporters shoved microphones in her face. "I just don't understand it," Beatrice sobbed on screen, her voice cracking perfectly. "Richard died yesterday. Yesterday. And this morning, his illegitimate daughter, whom I raised as my own, whom I loved, threw me and my children out. We have nowhere to go. She took everything. It's elder abuse. It's cruelty." The camera cut to Camilla, who looked small and fragile. "She always hated us," Camilla whimpered. "She manipulated Dad at the end. She made him sign things. We didn't know." Isabel turned the TV off, her stomach churning. "They're lying. They're spinning it." "Of course they are," Elena said calmly, buttering a piece of toast. "Beatrice knows she can't win in a court of law. The trust is ironclad. So, she is trying to win in the court of public opinion. She wants to shame you into a settlement." Mr. Blackwood walked in, looking exhausted. "It's working. The stock price for sterling shipping dropped 12% this morning. The board is panicking. They're calling for an emergency meeting at noon. They want to remove me," Isabel realized, "before I even start." "They view you as unstable," Blackwood admitted. "A vindictive 21-year-old girl who evicts widows. Beatrice has been calling the board members all morning. She's trying to rally a vote of no confidence to strip you of voting power before you can take your seat." Isabel sank into the chair. "I can't do this. I'm not a CEO. I'm just Isabel." "You are a vain," Elena said sharply, slamming her hand on the table. The china rattled. "And vainers do not hide." Elena stood up and walked over to Isabel. She lifted Isabel's chin. "Listen to me. Beatrice expects you to crumble. She expects you to offer her money to make the bad press go away. If you do that, you will never be free of her." "So what do I do?" Isabel asked. "You go to that meeting," Blackwood said, his eyes gleaming, "and you show them exactly who is in charge. But you can't go looking like this." He gestured to her oversized sweater and leggings. Elena smiled, a predatory glint in her eyes. "Go upstairs and shower, Isabel. I have called a personal shopper. She will be here in 20 minutes. We are going to dress you like war." 2 hours later, Isabel stood in front of the full-length mirror. She barely recognized herself. She wore a tailored navy power suit that cost more than she used to make in a year. Her hair was pulled back in a sleek, severe bun. She wore her grandmother's pearls, the vein pearls, around her neck. She looked severe. She looked rich. She looked dangerous. "The car is ready," Blackwood said from the doorway. He looked at her and nodded with approval. "Beatrice is going to be at the meeting. She's claiming she still has a seat on the board as an advisor." "Let her be there," Isabel said, picking up the leather portfolio Blackwood had prepared. It contained the evidence of Julian's embezzlement and Beatrice's unauthorized spending. "Are you scared?" Elena asked. "Terrified," Isabel admitted. "Good," Elena said. "Fear keeps you sharp. Now go take back your kingdom." The atmosphere in the executive boardroom on the 40th floor of Sterling Tower was toxic. The air conditioning was set to a brisk 68 degrees, yet beads of sweat were visible on the foreheads of several board members. Outside, the panoramic view of the Boston harbor was grey and weeping with rain, matching the mood inside. 12 men in charcoal and navy suits sat around the oval glass table. At the far end, to the right of the empty chairman's seat, sat Beatrice Sterling. She had recovered miraculously from her distraught widow performance on the morning news. Now, she was the picture of corporate shark-like efficiency, whispering furiously into the ear of Marcus Henderson, the company's CFO, and her longtime ally. Julian sat 2 seats down, looking bored and scrolling through his phone, seemingly oblivious to the fact that the company stock ticker displayed on the wall monitor was bleeding red, down 12.4% since the market opened. "Gentlemen, please," Henderson raised his voice, tapping a gold pen against the glass table to silence the murmurs. The market volatility is a temporary reaction to the unfortunate domestic disturbance at the manor. Beatrice is here to assure us that the estate matters are being handled. We need to issue a statement of stability. I propose we appoint Beatrice as interim chairwoman immediately to calm the shareholders. "Is that wise, Marcus?" asked George Galloway, a senior board member with thick spectacles. "The legal notice we received regarding the Vane Trust, it seems legitimate. If we back the wrong horse here, the SEC will eat us alive." "The Vane Trust is a relic," Beatrice snapped, her composure cracking for a split second. "It's a dusty piece of paper found by a senile lawyer and a disgruntled orphan. I am Richard's wife. I am the face of this family. Who are the shareholders going to trust? Me, or a 21-year-old girl who was making coffee for the staff yesterday?" "You make a compelling point about trust, Mrs. Sterling." A voice rang out from the double doors. The heavy mahogany doors swung open with a slow, deliberate weight. The room fell into a silence so profound the hum of the projector fan sounded like a jet engine. Isabel walked in. She was unrecognizable from the girl who had been thrown out into the rain. She wore a midnight blue tailored suit that sharpened the lines of her silhouette, making her look taller, formidable. Her hair was pulled back in a severe, elegant chignon, revealing the pearl earrings that had belonged to her grandmother. Behind her, flanking her like royal guards, were Mr. Blackwood and Eleanor Vane. Isabel didn't look at Julian. She didn't look at Beatrice. She kept her eyes fixed on the empty leather chair at the head of the table, Richard's chair. She walked the length of the room, the click of her heels sounding like the countdown of a clock. When she reached the head of the table, she didn't ask for permission. She placed her leather portfolio on the glass and sat down. "You can't sit there," Julian blurted out, breaking the silence. "That's Dad's chair. You're not even an employee." Isabel slowly turned her head to face him. Her expression was bored, as if he were a fly buzzing near her ear. "Mr. Blackwood, please distribute the agenda." "Agenda?" Henderson stood up, his face reddening. "Young lady, this is a closed session of the board of directors. You have no authority to be here, let alone lead it. Security." "Sit down, Marcus," Isabel said. She didn't shout. She didn't raise her voice. She spoke with a calm, terrifying, absolute authority. "The security team you are calling for has been replaced as of 8 a.m. this morning. The men outside the door work for me." Henderson blinked, his mouth slightly open. He looked at the other board members, but none of them moved. They were sensing the shift in atmospheric pressure. "Now," Isabel continued, clasping her hands on the table, "I am Isabel Vane. As the sole beneficiary of the Vane Trust, which holds a 51% controlling interest in Sterling Shipping, I am the new chairwoman, and my first order of business is an internal audit of the C-suite." "This is preposterous," Beatrice hissed, leaning forward. "You are a child playing dress-up. You know nothing about running a global logistics firm. Gentlemen, are we going to let this charity case dictate terms to us?" "I may be new to the chair," Isabel said, locking eyes with Beatrice, "but I know how to read a balance sheet, and I know the difference between business expenses and theft." Mr. Blackwood moved around the table, placing a thick, red-bound file in front of each board member. "Open them," Isabel commanded. Hesitantly, George Galloway opened his file. His eyes widened behind his glasses. "Good God, what is this?" Henderson demanded, staring at the pages in front of him. "Page 1, Isabel recited from memory, not even looking at the papers. A summary of corporate credit card usage for Mr. Julian Sterling over the last 18 months. It lists charter flights to Aspen, Ibiza, and Las Vegas. It lists invoices for client entertainment at nightclubs that, upon investigation, have no business connection to shipping logistics. I was networking," Julian stammered, his face pale. "You spent $45,000 on a single table at a club in Miami, Julian," Isabel said coldly. "Unless we are shipping vodka and sparklers, that is embezzlement." The board members turned to look at Julian with disgust. "And page 5, Isabel continued, her voice turning razor-sharp. "This is more interesting. It concerns a vendor called Montclair Solutions. We have been paying them a monthly retainer of $150,000 for international consulting." Mr. Henderson approved every single invoice. Henderson began to sweat profusely. He loosened his tie. "Montclair is a reputable strategic partner." "Montclair Solutions," Isabel interrupted, "is a shell company registered in the Cayman Islands. The sole signatory on the account is one Beatrice Montclair." "That is your maiden name, isn't it, Beatrice?" The room erupted. The board members were shouting over each other. "Is this true?" $3 million. "Marcus, did you sign off on this?" Beatrice stood up, knocking her chair back. "These are forgeries. She's lying. She's trying to frame us to steal the company." Isabel remained seated, the eye of the hurricane. "The routing numbers are confirmed by the bank. The signatures are verified. You have been siphoning money from the company my grandfather built, and you have been using it to fund a lifestyle you couldn't afford on Richard's salary." She turned to the board. "I am moving for the immediate termination of Julian Sterling and Marcus Henderson for cause, and I am filing a civil suit against Beatrice Sterling for the recovery of $3.2 million in stolen assets. Do I have a second?" "Seconded," Galloway said immediately, closing his file with a snap. "Thirded," another member said. "All in favor?" Isabel asked. Every hand in the room went up. Even Henderson's allies deserted him in the face of the evidence. "You can't do this," Julian yelled, standing up. "I'm a Sterling." "You are a liability," Isabel corrected him. She nodded to the door. The new security guards entered. They were large, silent men in dark suits. "Please escort Mr. Sterling, Mr. Henderson, and Mrs. Sterling from the building," Isabel ordered. "Revoke their clearance. Confiscate their company phones and laptops immediately." "Isabel, wait." Beatrice's voice suddenly changed. The arrogance vanished, replaced by a desperate, wheedling tone. She rounded the table, approaching Isabel. "Isabel, darling, please. We are family. Don't do this in front of them. We can work something out. I can pay it back. Richard wouldn't want this." Isabel stood up then. She towered over Beatrice, who suddenly looked very small and very old. "Richard wanted a family," Isabel said softly, so only Beatrice could hear. "You gave him a nest of vipers. You gave me 10 minutes to pack yesterday, Beatrice. Do you remember?" Beatrice's lip trembled. "Isabel." "I'm giving you 0, Isabel said, her voice hardening into steel. "Get her out of my sight." The guards took Beatrice by the arms. She didn't scream this time. She was too shocked. She looked back at Isabel with wide, terrified eyes as she was dragged out of the seat of power she had occupied for 20 years. Julian followed, weeping openly. Henderson walked out with his head down, knowing his career was over. When the doors clicked shut, The silence returned. But this time, it wasn't tense. It was respectful. Isabel exhaled, her hands trembling slightly against the table. She sat back down. She looked at the remaining board members. "Gentlemen," she said, her voice steadying. "Now that we have trimmed the fat, let's discuss the future. The Asian logistics merger my father was working on. I've read his notes. It's brilliant, but he was too cautious. I propose we proceed aggressively." Galloway looked at her, a small smile playing on his lips. "I think that's an excellent idea, Madame Chairwoman." The meeting lasted another hour. For the first time in years, actual business was conducted. When it adjourned, Isabel felt a strange mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. She had done it. She had faced the monsters under her bed, and she had won. She walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window, watching the rain clear over the harbour. Elena came up beside her. "You were magnificent," Elena whispered. "A true Vane." "It's not over," Isabel said, watching a police cruiser pull up to the curb far below. "Beatrice won't stop. She's too proud." As if on cue, the phone in her pocket buzzed. Isabel frowned. It was an unknown number. She hesitated, then swiped to answer. "This is Isabel Vane." "You think you've won?" A voice rasped on the other end. It was a man's voice, deep, distorted electronically, and chilling. "You took her house, you took her company, but you don't know the real secret Richard was hiding." Isabel's blood ran cold. "Who is this?" "The money isn't the only thing Beatrice stole," the voice hissed. "Ask Eleanor about the fire, Isabel. Ask her what really happened to your mother. It wasn't childbirth." The line went dead. Isabel lowered the phone slowly, the dial tone buzzing in the silence of the empty boardroom. She turned to look at Eleanor, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. The victory of the afternoon dissolved instantly, replaced by a dread far darker than anything she had faced in the library. "Eleanor," Isabel asked, her voice barely a whisper. "How did my mother die?" The phone in Isabel's hand felt like a piece of burning coal. The line was dead, but the rasping voice echoed in her mind. "Ask Eleanor about the fire." Isabel turned slowly to face her aunt. Elena was standing by the window of the boardroom, looking out at the city skyline, her posture rigid. The triumphant energy that had filled the room only moments ago had evaporated, replaced by a cold, suffocating dread. "Eleanor," Isabel said, her voice trembling. "How did my mother die?" Eleanor didn't turn around immediately. Her reflection in the glass looked haunted. "She died giving birth to you, Isabel. That is what Richard always said." "I know what Richard said." Isabel stepped closer, her heels clicking on the marble floor. "I want to know what you know. A man just called me. He said to ask you about the fire." At the word fire, Elena's shoulders sagged. She turned around, and for the first time, the Iron Lady of the Vane family looked old. "I told Richard this day would come," she whispered. "I told him secrets don't stay buried in ash." "Tell me," Isabel demanded. "It wasn't childbirth," Elena admitted, her voice shaking. "It was the summer cottage in Maine. You were 3 weeks old. Catherine was there recovering. There was a fire, a terrible electrical fire, the police said. Catherine managed to throw you out the window into the bushes below, wrapped in a blanket, just before the roof collapsed. Richard was in the city. By the time he arrived, there was nothing left." Isabel felt the blood drain from her face. "Why lie? Why tell me she died in childbirth?" "Because," Mr. Blackwood interjected gently, stepping forward. The fire investigator found traces of an accelerant. It was ruled inconclusive because the damage was so severe, but the suspicion of arson was there. Richard was terrified. He thought someone was targeting you. So, he buried the truth. He created the story of childbirth complications to protect you from the knowledge that someone might have wanted your mother dead. And Beatrice? Isabel asked, a sick feeling rising in her gut. Where was Beatrice when this happened? Eleanor's eyes hardened into diamond-hard points of rage. Beatrice was Catherine's nurse. She was the one who was supposed to be watching the house that night. She claimed she had gone to the pharmacy for medicine. When she came back, the house was gone. 6 months later, Richard married her. He said he needed help raising you. I always suspected she manipulated him in his grief, but I never had proof. Isabel looked at her phone. The man on the phone. He said he knows the real secret. If he knows about the fire, maybe he knows who set it. The setup. The caller rang back that evening. Isabel was back at Stirling Manor, sitting in the library where this all began. The storm outside had passed, leaving a heavy, ominous fog that pressed against the windows. $5 million, the rasping voice said. Cash, non-sequential bills. Drop it at the old shipyard, Dock 4, at midnight. Alone. I don't have that kind of cash on hand, Isabel lied, her grip tightening on the receiver. Mr. Blackwood was listening on the extension, while a team of private investigators recorded the call. You're a vain, the voice sneered. You have it. You have 24 hours, or I send the photos to the press. Photos that prove Beatrice Stirling was in the house when the fire started. Isabel's heart stopped. You have proof. I was the security guard that night, the man admitted. She paid me to look the other way. I kept the security tapes from the perimeter cameras. A nice insurance policy. I'm tired of being poor, Isabel. Pay me, and I give you the tape. Don't pay me, and I sell it to the tabloids. Either way, Beatrice goes down. But if you want the satisfaction of burying her yourself, you'll pay. Isabel looked at Blackwood. He nodded. Okay, Isabel said. Tomorrow night. Midnight. She hung up. We call the police, Blackwood stated immediately. No, Isabel said, standing up. She walked to the fireplace, staring at the flames. If we call the police, he might get spooked and destroy the tape, or Beatrice might find out and run. I need that tape, Arthur. I need to look her in the eye and know for sure. It's dangerous, Elena warned. I've spent my whole life being afraid of that woman, Isabel said, turning to face them. I'm not afraid anymore. Set up the drop. But we're going to do it my way. The dock. The shipyard was a graveyard of rusted metal and rotting wood. The fog was thick, swirling around the yellow street lamps like ghosts. Isabel stood at the end of Dock 4, a black duffel bag at her feet. She was dressed in a trench coat, the collar turned up against the chill. She looked vulnerable, but she wasn't alone. Hidden in the shadows of the shipping containers, 3 private security contractors hired by Elena were watching through night vision scopes. Mr. Blackwood was in a van a block away, monitoring the wire Isabel was wearing. Footsteps echoed on the metal grating. A man stepped out of the fog. He was older, unkempt, wearing a greasy mechanic's jacket. This was Silas, the former guard. You brought the money? Silas asked, eyeing the bag. Show me the tape first, Isabel said, her voice steady. Silas reached into his jacket and pulled out a plastic bag containing a small, outdated VHS cassette and a USB drive. Digitized it for you. Technology, right? How do I know it's real? Oh, it's real. A new voice cut through the fog. Isabel spun around. Stepping out from behind a rusted crane was Beatrice. She looked nothing like the socialite of yesterday. She was wearing dark clothes, her hair pulled back, a manic desperation in her eyes. In her hand, she held a small, silver revolver. Beatrice, Isabel breathed. You're working with him? Working with him. Beatrice laughed, a harsh, jagged sound. I hired him. Again. You really think this idiot would have the brains to blackmail you on his own? I knew you'd take the bait. I knew you couldn't resist the truth. You set the fire, Isabel said. It wasn't a question. Catherine was weak. Beatrice spat, moving closer, the gun trained on Isabel's chest. She didn't deserve Richard. She didn't deserve the life. I was the one who took care of him. I was the one who fixed him. She was just a barrier. She was my mother, Isabel said, tears pricking her eyes, and you burned her alive. I did what was necessary, Beatrice screamed, the facade of sanity cracking completely. And it worked. For 20 years I was the Queen of Boston. I had the money, the house, the respect. And then you little ungrateful brat. You had to ruin it. You just had to turn 21. So what now? Isabel asked, her hands raised slightly. You shoot me? Here? Silas will witness it. Beatrice glanced at Silas. Silas has been paid to dispose of the body. A tragic mugging gone wrong. The heiress, distraught over her father's death, wanders into a bad neighborhood. Bang! Case closed. Silas grinned, showing yellow teeth. Nothing personal, kid. Business is business. You won't get away with it, Isabel said. The police know about the embezzlement. They're watching you. They're looking for a white-collar criminal, Beatrice sneered. They aren't looking for a killer. Once you're gone, the trust goes to the next of kin. That's Julian. And I control Julian. I'll have it all back, Isabel. The house, the money, the power. It will all be mine again. Beatrice cocked the hammer of the gun. The click sounded like a thunderclap in the silence. Say hello to your mother for me, Beatrice whispered. Now! Isabel screamed, dropping to the ground. Beatrice flinched, confused. Suddenly, floodlights from the shipping containers blinded them. The roar of a helicopter overhead shook the dock. Federal agents, drop the weapon! Beatrice shielded her eyes, screaming, No, no! From the shadows, the security team moved in, weapons drawn. But they weren't just security. Mr. Blackwood had called in a favor from the district attorney. The FBI was there. Silas tried to run, but a tactical officer tackled him before he made it 3 steps. Beatrice stood frozen, the gun shaking in her hand. She looked wild, cornered, like a rat in a trap. Drop it, Beatrice, Isabel yelled from the ground. It's over. They heard everything. I won't go to jail, Beatrice shrieked. She raised the gun, not at the police, but towards her own temple. Don't do it, Isabel shouted, an instinctive plea for life, even for a monster. But Beatrice hesitated. In that split second of cowardice, a sniper round hit the revolver, shattering it in her hand. Beatrice screamed, clutching her hand, falling to her knees. Agents swarmed her. Handcuffs clicked. The Queen of Stirling Manor was dragged through the mud, screaming obscenities, kicking and spitting. Isabel stood up, brushing the dirt off her trench coat. She walked over to where the agents were holding Beatrice. Beatrice looked up, her face streaked with mud and tears. I raised you, she hissed. I gave you a home. Isabel looked down at her, her expression unreadable. You gave me a roof, Beatrice. I made it a home. And now you'll have a new roof, a prison cell. Isabel turned to the agent holding the evidence bag. The tape? We have it, Ms. Vane, the agent said respectfully. And the recording of her confession. She's going away for life. First-degree murder. Isabel watched them drag Beatrice into the back of a black SUV. As the door slammed shut, Isabel finally let out a sob. It wasn't out of sadness. It was the release of 20 years of poison leaving her system. The new era 6 months later. The spring sun was warm on the gardens of Stirling Manor. now renamed Vane Manor. The heavy dark drapes Beatrice loved had been replaced with airy light linens. The house smelled of fresh flowers, not old secrets. Isabel sat on the patio, reviewing the quarterly reports. Under her leadership, and with the Asian merger successful, the company's stock had doubled. She had fired the old board and brought in a new team, diverse, young, and hungry. Julian and Camilla were gone. With the assets frozen and their mother in prison awaiting trial, they had been forced to face the real world. Rumor had it Julian was working as a car salesman in Ohio, and Camilla was trying to become an influencer, though with no money to fund her lifestyle, she was failing miserably. Miss Isabel. Isabel looked up. It was Maria, the housekeeper. She was smiling now, looking 10 years younger than she had under Beatrice's reign. Mr. Blackwood is here. Arthur walked onto the patio, holding a small box. Elena was with him. We have something for you, Elena said, sitting down. Isabel opened the box. Inside was a locket. It was old, gold, and slightly scorched on one side. The police released it from evidence today, Blackwood said softly. It was found in the rubble of the cottage 20 years ago. Beatrice had kept it as a trophy. Isabel opened the locket with trembling fingers. Inside was a tiny, faded picture of a beautiful woman with laughing eyes, Catherine Vane, holding a baby. Isabel ran her thumb over the face of the mother she never knew. She would be so proud of you, Elena said, placing a hand on Isabel's shoulder. You didn't just survive, Isabel. You conquered. Isabel closed the locket and clasped it around her neck. It felt heavy, warm, and right. I didn't do it for the pride, Isabel said, looking out over the estate that was finally, truly hers. I did it for the truth. She picked up her pen and signed the final document on her desk. It was the establishment of the Catherine Vane Foundation, a charity dedicated to helping victims of domestic abuse and orphans find legal aid. Isabel Vane had been a servant in her own house. She had been disowned, mocked, and targeted for death. But as she sat there, the sun shining on her face, she knew one thing for certain. The storm was over. And she was the one left standing. The story of Isabel Vane serves as a powerful reminder that the truth, no matter how deeply buried, always finds a way to the surface. Beatrice thought her money and cruelty made her untouchable, but she underestimated the quiet strength of the girl she tried to erase. In the end, greed was the architect of the family's destruction, while integrity built a new legacy from the ashes. Isabel's journey from a disowned orphan to a powerful CEO proves that your worth is not defined by how others treat you, but by how you fight back when the world turns against you. If you enjoyed this dramatic story of justice, betrayal, and the ultimate karma, please give this video a big thumbs up. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, so you never miss a new story. Share this with a friend who needs a reminder that the good guys eventually win. Thanks for watching.